All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD or Application Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD 1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class for the fall 2019 semester, I've been creating a series of video presentations for the AWD 1111 class using the textbook that will be used for this class, ProASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Mr. Adam Freeman. We're working our way through the book, and we're just starting out in Chapter 21 of 27. I'm on the bottom of page 593 using a custom external helper method. It says using the external one is a little different than using an inline one. In listing 21.6, you can see the changes made to the index file to replace the inline helper with the external one. All right, so again, as we sometimes do, let's just grab the whole thing and we will replace what's in there in our index file with this file. I think that's much easier, less error prone. So if we look at the code here, all right, on page 594, we could have just grabbed it from the screen. The author says we need to ensure that the namespace that contains the helper extension method is in scope. So that's up here. The author says he has done this using an @using tag, but as mentioned, if you're developing a lot of custom helpers, you'll want to add the namespaces that contain them to the views/views/web config file so that they're available to you. Basically, it's like, for lack of better words, kind of like a library file or a library folder. I refer to the helper using the @html.helper, where helper is the name of the extension method. In this case, we use @htmlhelper.listArrayItems, as you can see where I've got the mouse pointed right now. The HTML part of the expression refers to a property defined by a view base class. This returns an HTML helper object, all right, which is the type to which we applied the extension method to in listing 21.5 previously. Tell you what, let's try it. So as always, we'll do a file save all, and we'll run the application. And you can see it looks the same as it did when we did the internal file. Now, the author mentions here on the bottom of 594, now that you've seen how helper methods work, you might be wondering when you should use them in preference to partial views or child actions. The author only uses helper methods to reduce the amount of duplication in views as done in the example, and only for the simplest of contents. For more complex markup and content, he uses partial views, and he uses a child action when he needs to perform any manipulation of model data. Now that's his standards. He recommends that you follow his standards, but of course he can't force you to do so. All right, top of page 595, managing string encoding in a helper method. The MVC framework makes an effort to protect you from malicious data by automatically encoding it so it can be added to a page safely. You can see an example of this in the home controller in the example application. I pass a potentially troublesome string to the model as shown right here. The model contains a valid HTML model object, contains a valid HTML element, but when it's rendered by Razor, it takes the less than tag and changes it into its HTML entity equivalent of ampersand LT semicolon, and it replaces the greater than tag with an ampersand GT semicolon. Why would it do this? Well, as the author mentions, it's a security precaution. And the reason for doing this is if you didn't do this, it would be possible that rather than doing something like this, you could put in a beginning JavaScript tag, put in some malicious JavaScript, and then put in your ending JavaScript tag. You don't want to allow that to happen. All right? So the author says to demonstrate this problem on the bottom here of page 595, we're to define a new helper method in the custom helpers.cs file. We need an extra using statement at the top. All right. Then at the bottom we put in this. All right, so we've added this method that you see right here on screen. All right, and the author says we use the string format method to generate HTML markup, and that's what we're doing here, and pass the result as the argument in the MVC HTML string constructor. All right, we're going to go in next and change the index.cshtml view to use the helper method. So let's just grab the entire thing as we have done in the past. All right. You can see the effect of the new helper method by starting the application. Okay. First, let's go back to here. File, save all as we do, and let's run the application. And they mention after showing this on page 597, the helper method is trusted to generate saved content, which is unfortunate because it can lead to the browser displaying an input element, which is the kind of behavior that somebody can use that they're not supposed to. All right. So one thing to do, and I've done this before, is if you go into an HTML form, now it wouldn't look like this and have a submit button, etc. But if you try putting this in there, something as simple as that, and you click the submit button and it shows an alert box with hello, what that means is it is now legal. When I say legal, I mean possible. Not legal like you should do it. No, you should never do it. But let's change it to possible for you to put potentially malicious JavaScript inside of an HTML form element. All right, it's code that somebody else wrote. So on the bottom of page 597 and going on to page 598 and 599, the author mentions there's a couple of different ways to solve this problem. The choice between them depends on the nature of the content that the helper method produces. The simplest solution as mentioned here is to change the return type to string. This alerts the view engine that the content is not safe and should be encoded. All right. So let's come back to our custom helper. And I'll tell you what, let's leave them both here. We're going to get an error, and it's okay. But notice Now we are returning, instead of an MVC HTML string, a regular string. So it should be automatically encoded by the system for us. That's what I believe, at least, the author is getting to here. And the author says, I have solved the problem with the input element. But my paragraph elements have been encoded as well, which is not what we'd like to have happen. All right. In these situations, I need to be more selective and encode just the data values. All right, so notice we're back to making it an MVC HTML string, but we're running in code when it's needed. All right, so again, we will put that in here. We will again come in here and comment this out, and then put in that. So, as mentioned on the bottom of page 598, the author says the HTML helper method defines an instance called encode, which solves the problem and encodes the string value so that it can be safely included in a view. The problem with this technique is you have to remember to use it. Okay? You can see the result in figure 21-5. I haven't been running this afterward, but we could, and we'd see something hopefully at least like this. Let's double check. So again, file, save all. Of course, if you were making these changes yourselves, you would be, after making any change, you'd be coming back and checking it to make sure it looks the way you want it to look. All right? Now, I'm only at 12.5 minutes or so. However, the next section is kind of a new main section using the built-in form helpers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right here, and we're going to come in and we're going to begin the next section right where you can see on your screen in just a moment.